Hey, y'all. Hi. My name is Mark Valdez. He, him. I am wearing a dark blue pants and a gray sweater and a red and black checkered shirt. I've got more salt than pepper in my hair these days, some glasses, and I should probably shave soon. For those who are need the assistance. He, him, and I'm the artistic director here at Mixed Blood, and I want to welcome you all and thank you for coming tonight to our Zealous Hellions event. Zealous Hellions is a series that we do kind of not on a regular schedule, but kind of as inspiration strikes. About 3 months ago or so, the Star Tribune did an article, a feature on Ellie Krug. And I read this article. I thought this person is amazing and is embodying and doing the kind of work that we strive to do. And I think in these moments where we're trying to figure out, like, how do you actually build bridges? Like, what is that work like? What does that take? I think Ellie's experiences will demonstrate some of what that can look like. And so super excited to have Hal Sansone, who is with the Trans Voices Cabaret, among other organizations, was with our trans and advisory committee here at Mixed Blood for many years. And we'll be having a conversation with Ellie Krug. And so they will introduce themselves, and they'll do a much better job. But if you would, please, welcome Ellie Krug and Hal Sansone.
Hello, everyone. My name is Hal Sansone. I use he, him pronouns. I will be interviewing the lovely Ellie Krug tonight. Little context on me. One, to describe myself, I am a white man in my late 20s. I have wavy, shoulder-length brown hair. I'm wearing circle glasses and a light pink turtleneck sweater. A little bit about me, I am a theater artist. I've been a company member with Sandbox Theater since 2018. I am also a love poet. I just published a chapbook with Ethel Zine called Winter Garlic, Healing Poems for My Root System. And I'm also an herbalist in training at MCTC. So I do gardening work and I do making teas and generally thinking about how to be of service in the community in many different ways. So really excited to be here tonight. I'm going to introduce you. Do you want to introduce yourself and describe yourself, and then I'll read your bio?
Sure.
Cool.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ellie Krug. For those who need it, I am wearing all black except for a gray blazer. I have sort of blondish, but mixed with a little gray hair that goes to the shoulder. Wear glasses. I've got some reddish lipstick on. Mm-hmm. And I am a woman, notwithstanding this voice.
Yeah, wonderful.
And she and her pronouns.
Thanks. Thank you, Ellie. So a little bit about Ellie. In 2009, when she was a civil trial attorney in Cedar Rapids with 100+ trials, Ellie Krug transitioned from male to female. She later became one of the few attorneys nationally to try jury cases in separate genders. The author of Getting to Ellen, a memoir about love, honesty, and gender change, from 2013, and a hopeless idealist, Ellie has presented her inclusivity training, gray area thinking across the country. Ellie is the recipient of a number of awards and recognition, including the 2023 Stonewall Award from the American Bar Association, a 2019 Outfront Minnesota Legacy Award, and Advocate Magazine naming Ellie as one of 25 legal advocates fighting for trans rights. In November 2022, Ellie was elected to her local school board in a rural urban county outside the Twin Cities, making her one of 8 transgender board members in America. Yeah, clap for that. Yeah. Thanks for being here, Ellie. I'm excited to talk to you.
Thank you, Hal, for that. Thanks for that great introduction that I wrote.
Yes.
Before we go any further,
Yeah.
I want to make sure I thank Mark and Alejandro, who's back there, and Scott, and Mixed Blood. I'm just thrilled to be here. As I told you before we started, Mixed Blood is where there was a performance of my play, a play based on my book in either 2014 or 2015. So this place has a special, special place in my heart.
Amazing. Well, I'm glad we both get to be here and revisit the stage and your story again. So we get to hear the version of your story in 2023, which is exciting. So obviously I did a little intro, and we talked about you've been an attorney, you train people, you do inclusivity training. You're also a storyteller, which we didn't get to. But I'm kind of curious about, like, can you describe in your own words, like, what kind of work do you do now? And like, how did, maybe being an attorney get you to where you are now?
Well, so the work that I do right now is multifaceted, but all of it is geared towards trying to make the world a better place. I am hopelessly idealistic. I'm a student of Dr. King and Bobby Kennedy. I was alive when they were alive. I was 11 years old when they were murdered, and before they went, their words sank into me about the need for us to make the world a better place. And so what I do now, in a variety of ways, is trying to, and I'm also happen to be Buddhist, and compassion and kindness are core tenets of Buddhism. And what I try to do is spread compassion throughout the world, my little world, and in the process of helping people to understand that, notwithstanding our differences, like the fact that this voice doesn't work with this appearance, that in the end, we're all trying to survive. We're all trying to survive the human condition and make our way. We all have many things in common, and I'm just trying to remind people of that.
Yeah.
I am.
Yeah, and you're doing it through gray area thinking and we were talking about upstairs too. You've written for a lot of publications too in the Twin Cities as well. And how did that? Because you went. Do you think? I mean, how does being an attorney fit into the compassion and the making a world a better place? Like, how does that?
Not very easily.
Yeah. You're like, how did,
I was a trial lawyer, and the thing about trial work, I was a civil trial lawyer. I represented two of the most friendly LGBTQ industries in the world, railroads and trucking companies. And but all the trial work is just selling an idea. That's all it is. I mean, most of the time, my clients were the ones getting sued, and the idea I was trying to sell is, well, it wasn't the railroad's fault that somebody ignored the crossing gates and drove in front of the train, okay? So the idea was, it was the plaintiff's fault, not my client's fault, or the plaintiff was inattentive, or was on their phone, or whatever. That's the idea that you're trying to sell. And in the work that I do right now, it's the same thing. I'm selling ideas, and the idea is that all of us have things in common, that all of us want to love and be loved. We do. Even those who are intolerant of trans people or LGBTQ plus people, they want those things. They want to love and be loved, and so I'm just trying to sell the idea that really we are interconnected with each other.
Yeah.
And so the trials, when I stand in front of an audience, I'm using some old lawyer tricks about how to keep people's attention and moving around and just helping to convey the communication. So being a lawyer was a really great training to do this. The wonderful thing is when I'm standing in front of audiences doing my work, I don't have to worry about another lawyer objecting to something that I said, or to a judge telling me, Krug, you can't say that. That's beyond the rules of evidence, type of thing.
Yeah, and I would imagine too, like, having that, because you do a lot of your training and work too in like rural spaces, right? And that's where you're doing your school board work as well, and so you're able to go and I'm making assumptions, but making assumptions about maybe people are less familiar with trans people, or maybe you're the first trans person they met, but I'd imagine that allows you to kind of enter these spaces and have that compassion or see,
Well, they have to be willing to let me enter the spaces. I mean, the challenge I have is that I can't just simply go somewhere. I have to be invited to go. But I find hands down that almost everybody that I encounter is willing, if you give them the space, if you don't, if you don't lecture to them, if you're not in their face, but you give them time to come along in understanding some of the things about interconnectedness, about compassion, about how we have these commonalities. If you give them the time to come along, many of them do. They do.
Yeah.
And yes, I am in many spaces the first transgender person, at least knowingly, they've ever met. And for me, that's a great responsibility, because I know that whatever I do will set the tonality for whoever follows. And so I'm always trying to set the right tone and to try and just be as down to earth as possible to let people know that I'm really just like them.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have like could you tell me about a time, like maybe in one of your trainings or in the school board work, where you saw that, bringing that compassionate piece and that understanding of like people want to be loved, like maybe you saw something shift in someone, or you saw maybe a spark or something kind of spark in a way?
Well, I've seen a lot of shifting in a variety of ways, but with gray area thinking, it's a learning opportunity, and it's a tool set on how to be welcoming to people who are different or other compared to us. And the training has 4 different modules to it. The first is about how we group and label other humans. I don't like to use the phrase unconscious bias because it's triggering for a lot of people. So let's just talk about what it does. It causes us to group and label others. But then the second module is how we group and label ourselves. And that second module involves me coming and putting signs on the walls representing different identities that humans have: education, religious, spiritual affiliation, skin color, LGBTQ status, socioeconomic class, alone, afraid, not good enough, compassion. And I'll get everybody together and I'll give them prompts and say, go stand by the sign that's responsive to the prompt for you, which is, the first prompt is the identity that my parents or parental figures stressed for me growing up. And we'll see people go stand by education a lot, particularly here in the Midwest, or by religion, or family. And then the second prompt is the identity that gives me the most privilege. The third prompt is the identity the third prompt is the identity others use against me. And the fourth prompt is the identity I struggle with the most. And by the time we get to the fourth prompt, because in between, I'm like, does anybody want to share why you're standing under a sign with each of those prompts? And then you might not think that people would be willing to do that, but they do. I mean, people get brave, and then other people get brave because somebody else is brave. And so by the time we get to the fourth prompt, the identity I struggle with, people have already been sharing about stuff that you would never have guessed about this person, okay? Because we don't know everything about people just simply by looking at them. And so when we get to this fourth prompt, the identity I struggle with, just almost consistently, I am running somewhere between 25 and 50% of the room are standing under one sign in response to the prompt, the identity I struggle with. And that sign is not good enough / failure. And when you see that, I mean, particularly like when I'm in organizations and I try not to know who is important in the organization. I try not to know that. But they know that. And then very often it's like the top people are standing under that sign, and people are like, you have it all made. And they're like, no, I don't. And so what happens, I think, is that breaks down the barriers that we have. And so I see light bulbs go on, and what I see, because it's this vulnerability, and what I see is people like, oh, maybe I can be vulnerable with you. But Hal, it's the last prompt.
Yeah,
the fifth
of course.
prompt. And the fifth prompt is, the identity I want to be known for is. And I will tell all of you, everywhere I go, somewhere, and this is, Hal, I've talked with you. I speak in red cities, blue cities, big states, small states, rural places, urban places, places where I am the first transgender person. And everywhere I go, when we get to this fifth prompt, the identity I want to be known for is somewhere between 70 and 100% of the room stand under one sign: compassion. It is unbelievable, because you see, if the room has 50 or 60 or 100 people, you see all these people just all start beaming over to that sign, and they stand under it, and then they're laughing and joking with each other because they didn't think that the other person would be somebody that would stand under this sign. And then when you get done with that, you just see all of these people. And then other people go stand by family. That's the next one. But family is also about compassion. It used to be about blood, but now it's about affinity. See, you asked me one question. I just go.
No, great.
I'm sorry about
no,
that.
No,
That's
don't apologize.
okay.
I'm glad. I'm glad that's
But
happy
when
to
you
hear it.
see that, you see these all of the light bulbs popping up, because you all realize that you care about each other far more than anybody would think.
Yeah.
And this work, there are other people that have variations of what I do, but I don't think there are any transgender women out there that have this voice that are going and doing this and seeing that we actually really want to care for each other, regardless of all the differences.
Yeah, no, I so appreciate that, and that's so encouraging to hear. Were you surprised by that, like when you first were seeing it in your trainings?
Oh my
or were you
God,
not?
yes, at first,
Yeah.
but not now.
Well, yeah, now, yeah.
600, more than 600 gray area thinkings in, because I tell people when we start the training, I said, I know how this is going to end. When we start this module, I say, I know how it's going to end, and people are like, what? And I'm like, hold on, you know how it's going to end.
Trust the process.
It always does. So that gives me great hope, but my frustration is that I can't do gray area thinking unless I get asked to do it.
Right.
So I have to be invited somewhere.
Yeah.
And then the other frustration, notwithstanding, my name being in the strip and all of that, I'm just this very, very little person. So nobody knows that this is going on.
Yes.
This will help.
This really opens it up.
Maybe 20 people that'll know this now,
Yeah.
okay? But
yeah, well, and I know we had talked about that. One, I think it's odd, I love that you interweave, when we think of identity and we think about the first things you described, right? LGBTQ status, socioeconomic status, et cetera. But then you interweave it with other, identifying as a compassionate person or identifying as not feeling good enough, and I don't see that a lot. How do we interweave both those sort of social identities with these other values identities? And I think that is that's really brilliant, because then it brings it all into the space rather than we have to be focused on one or the other.
Right.
It breaks down that, and I think that's so lovely, and it helps us appreciate both the differences, but then also the similarities, and being able to do both, I think, is really awesome.
Well, the whole purpose of that module about when we do the signs is about trying to prove to everybody in the room that regardless what your political affiliation is, what your religion is or not, how you identify, how you go to bed as, all of those things, that in the end, we are all attempting to survive the human condition.
Yeah.
We are all, and that is, I think that is a difficult thing to disagree with. Okay?
Yeah.
We are all attempting to survive it.
Yeah, I hear I'm a theater artist, and so it's that is my, I'm delicious to me of how are we, I think about it in terms of stories, or you're telling a story in a way too, where, I might get on stage and be like, this is theater, but you're also telling a story to people with the way that you lead them through training, and I think that's awesome, and that's
Thanks.
super cool. Yeah, and it's interesting, another thing we talked about with that, and you're talking about the, people not knowing about it, right? And we talked a little bit about sometimes, you talked about being idealistic, or, maybe people think it's too idealistic, or do people think it's naive, or how, and it feels like sometimes the people who are the loudest are the one who gets the attention, which is also a necessary energy, but then like this other energy that is more, there's a, I described it as a gentleness to it. And I mean, I really value gentleness. And so that's, I guess I'm just wondering like how, like what do you say to the people who are like, that's too idealistic? Like what is your response, or how do you navigate like those sorts of reactions and stuff as well?
Well, I think that the proof is in the pudding. I mean, people, hands down, seem to love gray area thinking. And then people really seem to like me. And I was at a church 2 weeks ago in Excelsior, the Excelsior United Methodist Church, and they did a book club for my book. Still doing a book club for my book 10 years after the book is out. I'm really thrilled about that. We had 80 people, I'm not kidding you, 80 people in the audience. I think almost all of them had read the book. And we did this. This is the way we did the book club. I had somebody facilitating questions. You know, and I would say that the average age in the room was probably 60. All right?
Yeah.
And afterward, people who came up to me. Some of them just wanted to give me a hug.
Yeah.
You know, and some of them had tears in their eyes. You know, these were straight cisgender folks. And I want to make sure that I make clear, I don't think I'm anybody great, okay? I'm not big on aggrandizement. But I think that what I represented in that space and what I represent in other spaces is a willingness to be vulnerable. And I think that people, just like Brene Brown has staked her reputation on, if you're willing to be vulnerable, it draws people in. And it's not performative vulnerability,
Right.
trust me, but it draws people in. And I think that, I think it sounds weird, but I think some people see themselves in me, you know, in that the challenges that I've had, still have some, trust me, okay?
Yeah.
We could do that for an hour. And,
Yeah, for sure.
But I think that they feel a sense of closeness about, if you can show up, Ellie, maybe I can show up.
Yeah, and I think too with like, you know, in the case of like your memoir, which is dealing with your life and also specifically transition of like, you know, the big secret is everyone does some kind of transition in their life, you know what I mean? Like we do gender ones,
sure.
but like,
Yeah.
and that maybe that's, but the reality is it's like we all, like you said, surviving the human condition, and our version of that might look on the surface so different, but it's really not. Like it's really
not.
like
No.
it's like, oh, you know, have you ever had something that completely, you know, it caused, we were talking about loss earlier, has a lot of loss? Did you have something that is, I don't know, totally rocked your world and everything you thought was true about it? Like, you know, a lot of people at some point, or did you go through a big physical change? Did your body change as you age? Did your body, like that, these are all things that, you know, it are there with trans people, and it's just, so I appreciate you taking the time to like, you know, sort of peel back the layers and be vulnerable of like, you know, this is a point of connection for all of us. It's not this like big, scary thing. You know,
Yeah, I mean, I think that where our country has gotten right now is a consequence of people doing the opposite of vulnerability.
Yeah.
You know, these, you know, that type of thing, and you know, and you know, I'm going to not tolerate you, and you can't exist, and all that type of stuff. And of course, I mean, we haven't even used the word fear,
Right,
but I mean, fear is underlying all that we're having, and so maybe, I don't know. I mean, maybe people become less fearful if you give them the space to simply share. I mean, everybody wants to be seen. Everybody wants to feel that they have value. And I think that, particularly in gray area thinking, I think that it just allows people to get that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and it makes me think of, you know, when you're talking about the, you know, a lot of people feel like they're not good enough. Like that's the fear, you know, and then the antidote feels like it's the compassion, whether for yourself or for other people, right? I think
Absolutely.
compassion can take such sting out of fear in a lot of ways, and I don't mean that lightly. Like I don't mean that that it's easy, and I don't mean that it's not. There's still not like a nervousness, but like I feel like it can take out that compassion piece can take out the fear piece in a lot of ways.
So I think it's really hard to argue with somebody and to diminish them if that person is saying, I care about you.
Yeah.
I'm going to, you know, send loving kindness your way.
Yeah.
You know, and I will tell you, I mean, you know, I've done, as I said, gray area thinking more than 600 times. It's probably closer to 800 times. And only, I can count like on 3 fingers the number of times I've ever had any problems
Yeah.
with anybody in the audience.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. You know, and I love that, and I really appreciate, you know, we talked about this too. I really appreciate the work you're doing. And something we talked about a little bit as well of just the like, you know, the differences generationally for trans people and the way that the relationships and to change and to how to approach things are different. And, you know, I'm really appreciative of the way you approach the work. But yeah, there's like a difference. Like with people my age, there's a different kind of, you know, I was saying, you know, the reason any of us can be out here being like mad and visible is because like you're out in Carver County doing this kind of work, you know, and this sort of difference, this you described as a schism sometimes between the generations of trans people and like that sort of thing.
There is, you know, I mean, people come to me and ask, tell me about the transgender community, and my answer is there is no one community. It's a community. It's a group of a whole lot of different people from different perspectives and different life experiences. But one of the things that I have found is that there's certainly intergenerational differences. You know, our younger folks, God love them, are less patient in many ways. Okay, you screw up on a pronoun, okay, and my God, you know, type of thing. And they're also very strident. You know, I mean, they're like, hey, you know, you need to give me my rights, and you need to see me, and I respect all of that. But this will not work out in Carver County. It won't work out in Wilmer. It will not work, you know, in Worthington. What will work is showing up, giving people space, telling people I'm not here to shame you, okay? We're just here to have a conversation. I'm just really like you, but give me a chance to prove that to you, okay? You know, and then, you know, always with me, I'm always, you know, kind of joking about the fact that the voice doesn't match the appearance, and I'm always making some kind of a joke like, you know, that there are half a dozen older women in Bemidji. 4 of them are 70, 2 are pushing 80. They just think I smoke 5 packs of cigarettes a day for 25 years. They've got no idea about me
Like,
being
it.
transgender. But you know what? When I say that, though, people laugh usually, and you know, and then people I think come to realize, well, she doesn't take herself too seriously.
Right.
Maybe I'm going to be willing to listen. This, you know, being in your face, okay, saying, I demand, that's not going to get you to people listening. What that will do is that will get people afraid. It will. And when they're afraid, we will not make any progress whatsoever. We'll go backwards.
Yeah, no, yeah, and that, I mean, it's the fear element again. And yeah, and you know, we had talked about too, it's like, it takes all kinds. Like, it takes all kinds. It's like, there's a time and a place for that.
Absolutely.
That, like, because we sometimes you need to strike a little bit.
For
just
sure.
a tiny drop of fear, you know, and then, but we can't only be in that. It's like, we can't only do that, and we can't, you know, so I don't know, I'm appreciative of the patience you have. Like, that's, and I talked about too, you know, it's almost a spiritual kind of work to, you know, go into these spaces and be, I'm going to listen, I'm going to hold the space, I'm going to, and you know, I really value the spiritual strength I see in a lot of trans people, especially trans elders, of this like incredible patience and this incredible gentleness that I find really admirable. And like I gotta like get into my meditation, be like, okay, Hal, take a deep breath. So I'm appreciative of that. But
Thank you for calling me an elder.
yes, of course, you are.
I like the. I'll go with that.
Yeah. I mean, I said
I'm
this. I mean,
still
this
alive,
is a
at
return
least.
of respect. No, yeah. Well, that's the thing. Intergenerationally too. Of like, we talk. I don't have conversations like this a lot, right? And
No,
like,
we don't.
We don't. And I have so much to learn. And like like I said, the only reason I can be out here doing the Trans Voices Cabaret, being like, it's all trans, like, and like, I'm hired on is because of like the people who came before
If
me.
I try and do that at my school board meeting,
like exactly. I'm like, yeah, exactly, And so, again, I'm interested in how these things inform each other, and so I'm curious too about like, what did you wish younger trans people knew about the kind of work you're doing, or like how you're seeing things change?
So, I mean, first of all, I absolutely need to acknowledge that I have incredible privilege, okay? I mean, I have been able to do what most transgender people my age transitioning, because I didn't transition until I was 52. I've been able to remake my life and thrive. I had the resources, the education, the health. I had the relative physique for it, and I pass if I don't open my mouth, and so there's great privilege, and I know that. But what I want our younger people to know is that I do believe that it will get better. I do believe that. But I also believe it will get worse before it gets better. I do. And I think that we need to rely on each other. We also need to rely on our allies, because there is so much fatigue out there right now. Back in 2016 when North Carolina passed SB1 and, we're banning trans people from bathrooms. The uproar in this country was unbelievable. People were, canceling concerts. The college playoffs moved somewhere else and all of that stuff. And now today, we have 22 states that have banned gender-affirming care, 23 states that have banned trans athletes from kindergarten all the way up to senior year of college. And people are fatigued. They're like, and the problem is that fatigue is working in the favor of those who are intolerant. And there is a group of people, I don't think it's many, but there is, determined group with resources that do seek to erase us, do seek to keep us from being in public. And what we need is our allies, because the day will come when that erasure will become far more evident.
Yes.
Those efforts at erasure. And here in Minnesota, thank God we live in Minnesota. Okay?
I feel very lucky. Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
But we are only one election away.
Yes, we are. Yep. Yeah, and I think, it makes, as you're talking about this too and talking about the ally piece, and it makes me think of, there's a non-binary scholar who talks about the idea of like unruly alliance, and like we have to look for, I think as trans people, it's not just a given that like I transition and I know a bunch of trans people and then I find all the, it's this, I've had to in my own life kind of find allyship, both with other trans people and with cis people and otherwise identified, in unexpected ways, and that's such in some ways it can be frustrating and lonely, but it's also a gift to be able to like, I even think about, the story you told about, the Marine in your neighborhood. Like, I don't know if you want to share that, of like that, even that, very surprising, like, oh, I have some support here, like that, I don't know if you want to share that story.
Sure,
I
will. For a decade, I lived in downtown, but in early 21, I moved out to Victoria in Carver County. And the reason I wanted to do that is I I wanted to get a dog, and not any dog. I wanted a golden retriever, and it's impossible to raise a golden retriever on the 12th floor of a condo in downtown Minneapolis.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I moved out to a new development of homes called villas, which is code word for old people. Mm-hmm. And on our street, it's a cul-de-sac, but with a long road, and then it goes into a cul-de-sac. On the north side are villas with no basements, just slabs. On the south side, where I live, are villas with basements. And so when I moved there, it became very clear to me that if there was a bad storm, the people on the north side without the basements would be kind of in a pickle. So I told my neighbors informally, and later on I actually sent a paper around to everybody. And I said, look, if there's a storm, come to my house. Well, at one point in a brand new house, moved this family, older folks, of course, and as I was going by, I noticed that on the back window of one of the cars was a Marine decal. Mm-hmm. And then I saw this neighbor, this man wearing a Marine shirt. Mm-hmm. And I thought, oh boy, this is not going to go well mm-hmm. because of who I am. Well, we had a storm. Paul Huttner from NPR lives in Victoria, and he's on the radio. This was April of last year. He's on the radio saying, I can see the tornado. It's going to be really bad here in Victoria. And I went outside, I opened my garage, I looked outside to see what it looked like, and I saw my neighbors across the street also doing the same thing. And I said, come on over, And so this man and his wife and a couple of other homes came over, and as soon as they get in, I'm like, what do you want to drink? So we grab all the booze and stuff and go downstairs into the basement and wait out this horrible, horrific storm. And as we were waiting it out, this man kept saying, Ellie, I can't believe you're doing this. I can't believe that you have us here. And I'm like, well, of course, you're my neighbors. Of course I do. And as the storm died down and everybody's like, okay, we're heading up, this gentleman, this Marine who I had grouped and labeled, who I'd assumed would never be accepting, as they were leaving, his wife was standing right there, he leaned down and he gave me a kiss on the cheek. He said, Ellie, you're all right. Yeah. And I think that moment just reinforced for me the course that I have taken, about compassion and kindness, and about just simply showing up. Sorry, post-nasal trip. Mm-hmm. It just confirmed for me that the path that I have embarked on is certainly the right path for me. Yeah. And hopefully it's a path that will light the way for those who follow.
Beautiful. Thank you for that story.
We should probably
are we doing our
take some questions.
Do some questions? Yeah. Thank you.
Alejandro, are you there?
Hi. Yes, I am. I feel like we should honor you for sharing all of that and for that story. Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you.
So, hi, y'all. Yes, I'm Alejandro Te, Associate Artistic Director here, he, him. Am I in the shot? Hi, folks who are tuning in on YouTube. There are actually quite a few folks who are tuning in live, so thank you so much. We're going to take a few questions now for Ellie and for Hal. And I was wondering, actually, I have one. I'm going to start while folks percolate, and then you can raise your hand. I'll come by with a mic so folks can hear us online as well. So I work often like in schools and with teachers and stuff like that, and folks who are on the ground. And it's sometimes the role of the school board is a little opaque to us, I'll be honest.
To me, too.
Oh, great. So I'm wondering if, as opaque as it may be, I'm wondering if there are any resources that we should be aware of or ways that we can activate our school boards or administrative systems or anything like that to help when we're when we're seeing things on the ground that need help, when we're seeing especially young kids who are maybe even just questioning or having questions about themselves and their identities and stuff like that. We want to be good allies, but the system's kind of against us. How do we pull in some like firepower on our side?
Well, there's no. I mean, that's calls for a really long answer, but the short answer would be, first of all, in Minnesota, the Minnesota Department of Education is very clear in its guidance and its regulations that all students, particularly and including LGBTQ students, deserve to be safe. Okay, that they deserve to be seen, and certainly as it relates to trans and non-binary students, they have the right to use the restrooms, the locker rooms, all the facilities that accord to their gender identity, not to the gender they were assigned at birth. Okay, so the law is very clear that students are to be protected. But, you know, there are various school districts where the school board is made up of people who are more conservative than liberal, who are less accepting, less, for the most part, more fearful because they don't understand. And when you're fearful, you want to resist and shut out. What you can do is a couple of things. First, elect the right people to school board, okay? And you know, and that, there were a lot of choices this, you know, in November. Many of them came through that were positive choices, but not all, okay? Secondly, many schools have GSAs, gay straight alliances, or gender sexuality alliances, they call them, you know, and you can support them. What you can do is you can reach out to a school and say, do you have a GSA? And if they say yes, you can say, is it possible for me to come speak to the students? Because many will allow you to do that, outside speakers. And you may also say, can I write you a check? You know, so $50 maybe so that you can have, you know, a pizza party to bring all the kids and have them have a safe space and a safe opportunity to get to know each other. And maybe, you know, a lot of these groups have allies that are straight, cis kids, but they come to these groups because they care about the queer community. So, and then, you know, if it's not working at a particular place, drop a dime. Call the Minnesota Department of Education, make a report, and if necessary, call Gender Justice. Okay?
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
First of all, thank you for all you're out here doing. So I really vibe with how you're talking about that gentle approach, gray area thinking, right? And I think sometimes when we're really, especially in interpersonal relationships, in people's face about things and loud, it's almost like protection, right? And then we don't get to like hear someone's response. But I can imagine when you're in those spaces of being more patient, you might hear things that are hard to hear, and you make a little more space for people's
You do.
hurtful things, right? They might say. So I guess my question really is like, how do you take care of yourself? How do you protect your parts that might get hurt, or like your open heart? Like, how do you take care of your points of need?
Oh, thank you for asking that question. I really appreciate you caring about my heart. I will tell you, it doesn't happen very often. It really does not. And I mean, part of it may be because it's self-selecting group, okay? There's that factor, but I also go into organizations where it's mandatory training. All hands on deck have to come to the training, have to come to the learning opportunity. And there have been very rare occasions where somebody has said something, but it's never been directed towards me. It's been directed towards, well, I haven't heard you say a single word yet about white cisgender men. Why haven't you talked about them yet? You're talking about all these other groups, okay? I mean, my answer is, well, we just started the training, okay? But, you know, I've been really lucky. And I think part of it is about the gentleness, you know, that approach. But I will tell you, so Hastings, Minnesota, has a history of intolerance. And 4 or 5 years ago, the newspaper or several of the churches put a letter in the newspaper saying, we accept everybody, except we don't want transgender people in Hastings. And so I said, I've got to go to Hastings. And remember, I said, I can't just go somewhere. So it took me almost a year to get somebody to sponsor me to go to Hastings. And I went on a cold November night. It's one of the few times I've ever had to take security measures about going and speaking somewhere, because I was going to go and do a Trans 101 talk about what it meant to be transgender. And I thought it was quite ironic, I'm in a middle school giving this talk in Hastings, and there were 140 people in the audience. Many of them were church people. And I started the talk out by saying, I'm not here to yell at you. I'm not here to shame you. And I said, I'm no one special. I'm just simply attempting to survive the human condition. And then I said, I'm not the only one in this room who's attempting to do it. All of you are. And if we had, 10 hours, we could go through the room, we'd find people, everyone would laugh. If we could share our stories, everyone would laugh. Everyone would cry, but at the end, everyone would feel closer to each other at the end. And then I just went on and talked about what it meant to be transgender. We got to the questioning part. It was only supposed to be an hour talk. We got to the questioning part, and I started getting the questions from the church people. And I'm sorry, I'm using that phrase, church people. Please understand, I'm not trying to be judgmental. It's just I'm trying to characterize how that we had different groups. And I got the questions that I thought I would get. Ellie, you seem like a nice person, but what about the 50-year-old man who says he's a 10-year-old girl? What do we do about that? I'm like, that doesn't happen, okay? I mean, what, But we got to the hour, and the questions kept coming, and I said, listen, we're only supposed to go an hour. If you need to leave, leave, but I'll stay here. Do you know out of 140 people, 4 people got up and left? All the rest stayed. And I kept asking, some of the questions were, very ignorant questions, but I was kind and tried to be as gentle with them, and I wasn't like a smart aleck that I could be, And we got done at the end. Some of the church people came up to me. A woman came up to me and she said, Ellie, this wasn't at all what I expected. I thought you were going to come and yell at us. I thought you were going to shame us. She said, you didn't do that. And I had another person come up, another church person, say, my brother came out 2 weeks ago, my adult brother, and he didn't tell me in advance, and I'm hurt about that, Ellie. How can I deal with that? And then another person came up and said, Ellie, I've been marginalized because of my religion. Would you be willing to give me some of your time so that we can talk about how I can deal with that? We can get there. We can get there. We just have to try. And we have to get past the fear, because those people who came to that talk, they had to at least get past their fear of me to be in the room.
Yeah.
Sorry, long answer.
No, that was great. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alejandro. Thank you, Ellie. Thank you, Hal. My name is Malik. I was thinking about the dichotomy that you guys were pointing out about the separation of the generations. That there's this and then there's the come on guys, we could, if we just have a conversation, this could be better. One of the ways as a black man that I've noticed is there is a value to having people understand that you have a sword. You will keep it in the scabbard as long as they let you do that. And if they decide that it needs to be different, then it's going to be different.
Yes.
But the question I'm asking is, how do we build our institutions so, as Ellie said, if push comes to shove, there's a law that says y'all can't do that.
Yeah.
And don't make me have to bring some lawyers in here. And there's money involved, it's problematic. But how do you bring your community in as much as there is a community, together to understand there needs to be a hard edge and there needs to be humanity. Because without the hard edge, people don't respect you enough to bother listening. Because they're, well, why do I have to listen to you? You guys, whatever, you're nothing. You're bugs. But we're not bugs. But bees have stingers. Crabs have little crabber thingies. People have to know that I can love you and I can set a boundary and you will respect that boundary. Not I'm asking you nicely to, but this is a clear, bright line. Come over here and it's gonna be an issue. But I'm asking, how do you create community that allows for both spaces and lets everybody outside know, I don't hate you, I'm just not gonna let you beat me up. That's not gonna be a thing.
Well, thank you for that, Malik, and that really great question. I'm going to push back a little bit because I haven't ever really felt the need to even mention the sword. Because, as Hal and I talked, I think it's incredibly difficult to object to someone who says, I care about you. And I think it's incredibly difficult when somebody is saying, I will have compassion for you. Even if you may be intolerant towards me. And I certainly understand, and absolutely, in some settings, absolutely, I mean, there are certainly, to be clear, there are places where I know I cannot go, okay? There are places where this puts me at physical risk. I realize that. But in some of those places, I do get invited. I mean, I've been to Texas and done the work. Don't ask me to go to Florida. I won't go to Florida, okay? You know, I was down in Atlanta, you know, this year, training the clerk of court office in the federal bankruptcy court. And so, my approach is never to even get close to having to talk about the sword, because I don't think it's going to accomplish anything. But I do know, just as I said, okay, if, for example, a school district is not responding and you've tried every other way, then you bring in the lawyers. You know, I mean, we don't just simply fade away and take it. But my goal is to not have to worry about taking it. It's to try and change the attitudes on the other way. Now, you used the word naive when we started, you know, this whole thing, and I will be the first to admit that if you go to Webster's dictionary and you look up naive, Ellie Krug's picture is right next to it. I will be the first to admit that. But my naivete, in many ways, has allowed me to go do things when maybe if I wasn't as naive, I wouldn't have done them.
Yeah. I also wonder if we talked about how like you're invited. I wonder if the invitation is a key part of that too, right? Like it's like there's this baseline vulnerability of they're like, we don't know something, you know,
Yep.
and then you meet them there. Like you go in like, I see that you invited me. I see that you said you don't know, and I'm not here to shame you because you were willing to take that step of
Yep.
vulnerability first. And like I feel like that's the difference between the people who are just going to get out there and they're going to be ready to fight you. Like that, I just add that as well into the mix.
But I mean, and this fear thing will cause many people that would just simply, there'd be many people that would just simply reject anything to do with Ellie Krug.
Yes.
You know, and I understand that.
Yes.
But I also know this. There are far more queer people out there, but particularly far more trans and non-binary people out there than anybody knows.
Oh, yes.
And I will go and I will do a gray area thinking talk or another talk that's not queer related. And I will have people all the time come up to me and say, Ellie, my daughter or son is trans, or my grandchild is, or my, niece or nephew or whatever, and always when they do that, I say, thank you for loving this human in your life, because it's not a given. And so what I believe, okay, Malik, is I believe that, and I don't know how many people will acknowledge it, but America is blending. Okay? I mean, we have people of different skin colors marrying, and then they have children of different skin color. We have families where we have queer people, straight people, cis people, trans people. We have families with multiple different religions or none. I mean, this is what's happening in America right now, notwithstanding all of the conservative pushback and all of that stuff. This is what's happening. And it is, I believe, what will be our saving grace. Because it's awfully hard, although we know that it happens, it is awfully hard to hate somebody that you loved until yesterday, when they came out, or when they brought somebody different home.
Yes. Yeah.
Ellie, we are so grateful for you joining us in our home. We have to give a pause here for the sake of time, but we invite you all to continue this conversation, both here and out in the world and in your lives. First, though, we want to give a huge thanks to Hal and Ellie. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Hal.
Thank you,
Thank you so
Ellie.
very much.
And I will also say that right here in this space, on this stage next week, is the Trans Voices Cabaret. If you want to give the dates
can I
and times for
plug?
that,
Yes.
please.
Okay, so opening tomorrow, a week from tomorrow, it's called the Trans Voices Cabaret. It's an event that exists all over the country, and this is the Minneapolis premiere. It's an all trans and non-binary musical theater cabaret. It's going to be the 9th, 10th, and 11th of December. There is when you see the little the TV out there, my face will come up. There'll be a QR code that will bring you to the tickets. Otherwise, we're on Instagram, Trans Voices Cab, MPLS. That'll also bring you to the tickets, but it's going to be really cozy. Everyone working on is trans and or non-binary, and Mixed Blood generously donated the space. So.
Let them know NPR is doing a piece.
Oh, and NPR is doing a piece on us, so come find us. But yeah, it's gonna be really cozy, and it's the Trans Voices Cabaret Minneapolis, 9th, 10th, and 11th of December. And there'll be a live stream as well if you're joining, so on Sunday night.
And while we're here talking about incredible things that you can go out and experience right now, is it Getting to Ellen is the book?
Yes. Oh, yes.
So you can also pick up Getting to Ellen and get to know more about Ellie Krug and continue the conversation that way. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Julia.